The House has resumed. Members, when the House rose for dinner, the House was debating the second reading of the Employment Relations Amendment Bill. Denise Roche has the call. She has about 8 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Denise Roche.
When we were interrupted, I was talking about balance and fairness. And before I get into my speech, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of Viv Walker, who was a stalwart of the Wellington Union movement and a good feminist. And it was her funeral tonight. She strongly believes in fairness, and her funeral was actually a fundraiser for the Pay Equity campaign. Mr. Speaker, we believe that a balanced approach means that workers' rights are protected, that managers manage well, and where businesses thrive from a cooperative work environment. And there are examples of this, and we had submissions from the Dairy Workers Union members who are highly unionised, who have a thriving relationship with their employer and excellent productivity as a result. They are well unionised, they bargain collectively. Mr. Speaker, it's a false economy to legislate like this. Over 400,000 people are receiving working for families. That means the taxpayer is subsidising employers to keep wages low. For low-paid workers, like, for example, the cleaners who clean this house, who are unionised, who earn $14.10 an hour, the costs of that low pay is externalised. That means the taxpayer pays the social costs that come with poverty wages. When we lift wages through good union rights and collective bargaining, all of us are better off. So how do workers improve their wages? Through collective bargaining, through the ability to organise and join a union. And this bill removes the duty to conclude bargaining. It cuts through any attempt that workers can make to improve their lot. It removes the right for workers to be included in a multi-employer collective if the employer doesn't want to be part of it. It allows employers to refuse to bargain. Basically, it undermines all the principles of good faith that are in the existing legislation. It further harms working conditions by allowing for the divide and rule of workers by employers. So where a workplace currently has a collective employment agreement, this bill will remove the right of new employees to be on that collective for the first 30 days. So it takes us back to 1991 and the Employment Contracts Act, where the focus was on individual bargaining. But there's little choice of bargaining your wages and conditions, and there's little power and very little balance in the employment relationship when you want the job, when there are thousands of other workers who are unemployed who will take less than you to get that job. When you combine that with the 90-day trials that this government introduced, which allows employers to sack workers for no reason whatsoever after 90 days, we have a situation where the balance is tipped in favour of the employer and the employee has very little say whatsoever. It undermines, and that very thing undermines the ability for other workers to get decent pay and conditions because it pulls everybody's wages down. Mr. Speaker, we received written submissions from over 12,000 union members, and all of them were really concerned about the clawbacks in this bill that will erode their wages and conditions. As a worker, the only way to redress the imbalance in the employment relationship, and so much employment law actually shows that the relationship is not balanced, the only way you can redress it is through collective bargaining and collective action, and in worst cases scenario, when things go wrong, through industrial action. This bill will actually escalate industrial action by introducing penalties on workers if they are participating in partial strikes. That is their last-ditch weapon of negotiation. If they participate in a partial strike, they will be penalised. What that means, and we heard this from submitters, is that they'll go, oh well, might as well go the whole hog and go on strike. So it actually is conducive to poor employment relationships, sir. I have to say, a lot of the provisions in this legislation is using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. There's only around a dozen cases of industrial action or industrial unrest in the last few years, and that's been tallies in the meat sector and the ports of Auckland have been two major ones. And workers faced huge clawbacks from their employers there and faced casualisation, and it was the employer who took militant industrial action by locking them out. Mr. Speaker, this bill is mean-spirited. The removal of tea breaks, for heaven's sake. It totally undermines any of the health and safety legislation that's just recently been introduced to the House last week, where actually having a tea break is a time for a worker to rest, and they will be under pressure. You can bet your boots they will be under pressure to sell it in exchange for, I don't know, a lolly. Mr. Speaker, it also removes the provisions, the only provisions that we've had in law, and it was thanks to the Labor government and frankly by the work of Darian Fenton from Labor, and that is the removal of Part 6A of the bill, which was the only protection for vulnerable workers. It was the only way they could be sure of security of work if their current contractor, cleaning contractor or laundry contractor was undercut by another. These workers are not in a strong position to be able to take industrial action, to be totally militant, and this was their only protection. And this government has eroded it to the detriment of those workers. Mr. Speaker, we've heard a lot about productivity and that this is about increasing productivity, but actually what we know is that productivity has increased over the last 10 years while wages have stagnated. And our rockstar economy is not working for the low paid. This legislation cements in inequality. The provisions in this bill will ensure that another generation of workers are condemned to low wages and poor conditions. This legislation is a breach of human rights, of our international obligations. We want good lives and fair futures for all workers in Aotearoa, New Zealand, Mr. Speaker, and this bill will not deliver it.
Speaker.
Mike Sabin.
Thank you, sir. The member who just resumed the sheet